Welcome, Margaret and Nicolás.
Good evening, bienvenidos. My name is Margaret Conner-Quaid. I'm the Deputy Director of the Hispanic Society, and it's really an honor tonight to welcome all of you in the third installment of a series of talks highlighting the works of our 2022 Research Artist Fellows. On behalf of the entire staff here at the museum, I really thank you for joining us. I thank you for your time and your interest and for supporting these brilliant artists. It's been a pleasure for us to work with them. The Hispanic Society has a rich tradition of encouraging the work of contemporary artists. In his time, our founder, Archibald Huntington, patronized, hosted, and honored many living artists, including the painter Joaquin Sorolla, Ignacio Zuluaga, and the watercolors featuring in our recent exhibition, as well as photographer Ruth Matilda Anderson and the poet Rubén Darío, among many, many others. With the generous support of the Vilcek Foundation, as well as the New York State Council of the Arts, NYSCA, the Research Artist Fellow Program seeks to recognize and to renew the tradition of supporting living artists that remain an important part of our ongoing mission here at the Hispanic Society. I'm really delighted tonight to introduce Nicolás Dumit Estévez, Raful, Espejo, Ovalles, who treads an elusive path that manifests itself performatively through creative experiences that he unfolds within the quotidian. He has exhibited and performed at so many places, it's hard to even list in one breath, but those include the Madrid Abierto Alto, the 9th Havana Biennale, the Performa, Identicitat, the Prague Quadrennial, the Pontevedra Biennial, Call Walks, Queens Museum, MoMA, Printed Matter, PS 122, as well as Princeton University, the Anthology Film Archive, the Museo del Barrio, the Center of Book Arts, the Smithsonian Museum of the American Indian, Franklin Furnace, the Lower Manhattan Cultural Council, just to name a few. Nicolás has received mentorship in the arts and everyday life from Linda Mary Montana, a historic figure in the performance art field. Residencies attended include PS1 MoMA, Yaddo, and McDowell. Nicolás holds an MFA from the Tyler School of Art, Temple University in Philadelphia, where he studied with Coco Fusco, and an MA from the Union Theological Seminary in the city of New York. He was born here in Quisqueya, his motherland. He was baptized in Bronxite, as he calls it, and citizen of the Bronx. Nicolás is the founding director of the Interior Beauty Salon, an organization living in the intersection of creativity and healing. And he is going to share with us really a mountain of work that he's done. His website, for those of you interested, is www.interiorbeautysalon, and I encourage you to check it out. Before I pass it on to Nicolás, I just want to say that this is a live discussion, so I encourage you viewers in the audience to please leave questions and comments for Nicolás in the chat so we can address those questions in our discussion. Please also tell us where you're from. So it's with that, Nicolás, I hand you over the screen.
Buenas noches. Welcome, everybody. Welcome, todas, todes, todos. I'm Nicolás. I have a very long name. I'm Nicolás Dumit Estévez, Raful, Espejo, Ovalles, and on and on. And I am sitting on unceded Lenape land, South Bronx. And I actually I was born in Quisqueya, which is Taína land, unceded as well. And I'm sitting here at home. In the background, you can see what it's called a pelliza. It's a traditional tapestry kind of a artwork created by Doña Ritica in Santiago de los 30 Caballeros, late Doña Ritica. So thinking of you. Welcome, everyone. And tonight, find a comfortable place, whether you're sitting on a chair, lying down on a couch. Just see if you can feel the gravity, whatever part of your body it's coming in contact with the earth. Just acknowledge that. Today we will be talking about the experience, the pilgrimage, which I co-created with the Hispanic Society and which I entitled Envisioning the Brown Mother. If we can go to the next slide. And I'm referring to La Virgen de la Altagracia, also known as Tatica. And I undertook this pilgrimage, or we undertook this pilgrimage together. Next one. So we went on a pilgrimage from the South Bronx, which is the place I call home, to Washington Heights, which is the place that received me when I moved to New York City 30 plus years ago. Next one. And this pilgrimage was undertaken as part of an artist research fellowship, as Margaret mentioned, with the Hispanic Society Museum and Library. Next slide. So before we delved into what we did with the Hispanic Society in terms of pilgrimage, I would like to briefly mention, for art's sake, Por Amor al Arte, a series of 7 pilgrimages that I undertook from 2004 to 2007. I went to different museums. My departure points were either Lower Manhattan Cultural Council, which is in Lower Manhattan, obviously, and Franklin Furnace, which is now in Brooklyn. I will leave from one of those 2 supporting organizations and engage on a penance to a different museum. Here I am walking backwards from Lower Manhattan to the Bronx Museum of the Arts. I did that for 2 days, spending the night at the Bronx Council on the Arts. That's a long story, part of the mythology. And this photograph was taken by Manuel Acevedo. Next one. Next slide. And if we can see the next slide, I'm traveling to the Jersey, back with the blue vestment, backpack. That one, traveling from Lower Manhattan again to the Jersey City Museum, obviously in New Jersey, carrying the letter P, which was made in Santiago by an ironsmith, late ironsmith named Nelsie, and carrying the letter P and talking about penance, performance, painting, pilgrimage, stopping at different places in Jersey City, and finally getting to the Jersey City Museum and meeting the director. And these pilgrimages are formatted following the tradition that has been happening for centuries, where people go to, or they engage in El Camino de Compostela in Spain to visit the reliquary of St. James Apostle. Next one. And talking about pilgrimages and talking about traditions, I would like to mention the name of a mentor and friend, art mother of 20 years, and that is Linda Mary Montano. You can see myself on the, I don't know how you see this, on the right, and Linda is on the left. And this experience, as I call it, was called Hope. This was Linda's experience, and she invited me Hope, like Esperanza. And for this, we walked for 3 days, 3 consecutive days through different neighborhoods from the South to the North Bronx, all over the place, meeting different groups from teenagers to elders, and also meeting strangers, meeting passersby on the streets and asking them to write their hopes directly on our clothing. So we basically work as walking billboards. And this pilgrimage was supported with or by the Bronx Council on the Arts. Next one. And here we are, Tatica, La Altagracia, Tago has many names. I learned that, and I don't even know how to say this. I've been trying to figure this out of like 12 Dominicans, 12 women identified, female identified Dominicans. Out of 12, I think it's out of 12 or 10, one is named Altagracia. That's perhaps the most popular name in the Dominican Republic. So let's concentrate on the devotion to La Virgen de la Altagracia, Our Lady of High Grace, the history let me make a difference here. The history goes that she, or this activity that you're looking at, which is a small painting, an old painting from the early 1600s, was brought to the Dominican Republic by the colonizers from Extremadura, Spain. And this is a nativity, as you can picture here, the mother, Saint Joseph in the back, and the child. So now the story, I told you a little bit about the history. The story goes that a girl who was living in Higüey de Salvaleón, which is in the eastern part of Quisqueya of the Dominican Republic, I should say. There was a family living there way back in the 16th century. The family, there was a mother, father, kind of a traditional family. Father, mother, or the way traditional families had been envisioned historically, and all of that is changing, of course. Now there's all kinds of shifts when we talk about gender and family and all of that. This family was composed of a father, a mother, and two daughters. One daughter was kind of vain, and when the father went from Higüey to Santo Domingo to sell his products, she wanted dresses, she wanted laces, she wanted jewelry, and the father said, okay, I'll bring you all of that. The other girl had a dream with the deity, and that deity was la Virgin de Altagracia. So she asked the father to please bring an image of her. The father went to Santo Domingo, asked half of the city or the town, whatever it was called at that time. Nobody knew who the Virgin was, this Virgin. Until on his way back, he met an older man, and the man pulled an image out of his bag, and there she was. When he went to thank the man was gone. He brought the Virgin to Higüey, gave her to the daughter. The Virgin was placed in the house, in the home. The Virgin would disappear. They would find her in an orange tree. So oranges are really part of also of this mythology. And I do love oranges. So they will bring the Virgin back into the house. She will go on top of the tree. Eventually, they built a chapel there. And if we can move forward with the slides. And the tiny chapel from the, way back from the 16th century, eventually became this basilica, which is the Basilica de Higüey, which is obviously in Higüey. And they broke ground in 1954, and then there was a competition. And two French architects won the competition, and they created this brutalist monument to the Virgin of Altagracia. It was completed in 1970. Next one. Many years ago, I was in Santiago, and I went into La Sirena, or the Mermaid, which is a department store, but a modern one, contemporary one, with all kinds of things. You basically can find anything you want or are looking for there. And I was looking at all the crafts and all the, everything is kind of separated, but at the same time, everything is there together, from detergent to cat food to jewelry to postcards. I saw this painting and I looked at it carefully, and I'm like, oh, what's going on? What is this? I held the painting, and it was a rendering of the Virgen de la Altagracia. It was actually like an acrylic painting, and I immediately got it, and I realized that the painting was signed by Catman Matias Antigua. I have no idea who the painter was, and it's absolutely beautiful. So I bought it, I have it. Next one. And I started to think about image and representation, and how the image we saw before, the one that was brought by the colonizer, is pretty much a European image. It's a white-looking Virgin. We talked about the traditional family, and I kept questioning, how would the Virgen of Altagracia look if she would represent physically Dominican people? And so I started to think about the grandmother. And with that said, I want to open the scope of what brownness might mean. So it's not exactly confined to the color of the skin. It goes beyond that. So I'm going to read a small sentence from a short sentence from The Sense of Brown by Jose Esteban Munoz, a scholar from NYU. And in this book, he says, the sense of Brown, he sees that as a commons, which includes, quotation mark, peoples, places, feelings, sounds, animals, minerals, flora, and other objects, end of quote. And I say, yet this brownness, Esteban Muñoz continues, so I'm re-articulating what he says, is not just about a self-sufficient organism. It is also about movement and contact, and they can kindle out in the world. So I am very interested in this idea of the brown and brownness, how we can kindle movement out in the world. I would like to mention that the photo where I'm dressed all in blue was taken by Kamanse, and the ones in which Linda Montano and I appear was taken by Alex Villaluz. So next slide. And this is a contemporary rendering of La Virgen de la Altagracia by a dear friend, brother, Josue Gomez in Santiago. Josue kindly sent me this image that he made in preparation for the devotion of the Virgin, which is celebrated on January 21st. And it is interesting to say that the Virgin is seen as the Dominican protector, the protector of many people in the Dominican Republic. It is also interesting to say, or I should point, that the devotion extends to our neighbors in Haiti. And I have heard that when the celebration of the Virgin is happening big time, there is one of the events includes a mass in Creole. So the Virgin is venerated both in the Dominican Republic and in Haiti. Next slide, please. And talking about families and nuclear families, I had all these fantasies about how the family in the nativity, the traditional nativity of the Virgin of Altagracia could be rethought, could be challenged, could be rearticulated. This is a photograph of my family, my father holding me and smiling. I'm in the middle, and then my mother's on the side. And I feel that personally, and this doesn't represent everybody, this picture captures so much of the confluence of cultures that represent or might represent the Dominican Republic. And again, this is my own experience. My father, a Black appearing man, although I don't know up to this day, I don't know how he saw himself. I'm not sure if he saw himself as a Black man. He's probably mixed race, Black appearing, myself in the middle, and my Lebanese and probably European mom, but my mom is half Lebanese. So one of the propositions I had for Josue was if he could paint the family of, Joseph, Virgin of Altagracia, and myself, or if he could filter, let me say this way, if he could filter my family into the icon that we just saw. So that's an interesting proposition, I think. Next one. And then you would ask, but what were you doing at the Hispanic Society? And I consider myself more of a generalist. Although I have like 2 master's degree, I almost went for a PhD, and I say, no, I'm more of a generalist. I'm into one of these people who's into everything. So when Alexander Campos, who invited me to come to the Hispanic Society to do research, asked me, but what is the object that calls your name, that calls your attention? I did not have an object. I was sensing the building, I was feeling the museum, and I was feeling the energy of the place. And I realized, it became revealed to me that, hey, this was the neighborhood, meaning the neighborhood where the Hispanic Society is, Washington Heights, Harlem, a confluence of the both sometimes. This is the neighborhood that welcomed me when I moved to New York City from the Caribbean. And what is my research about? So I was looking at paintings like this by Maria Villamor, created in the 13th century. Next one, looking at the mother, but also looking at what was given to me. I think the first or second day that I went to the Hispanic Society, Alex Campos handed me this brochure with capes, with photographs of capes worn by older men in La Alberca in Salamanca, Spain. I would love to go to this place to see how these capes are being used nowadays. Next one. I'm thinking of capes as somebody who grew up in Santiago, also looking from a distance at the carnival. So I'm pretty much embedded at the intersection, I should say. I feel at the intersection of the sacred and carnival, looking at the secular and the sacred, looking at the kind of that the party that the carnival represents, and then looking at the space that the sacred inhabits, and maybe like living in an in-between space between the mass and the carnival. And Marcel Althaus Reed, which is a writer from Argentina, actually speaks of the carnival as the mass for the indecent, for all of that doesn't find a place within institutional society. So looking at these sacred capes from Spain, and also looking at these traditional outfits that people wear for the carnivals. And these are the Diablos Cojuelos, the limping devils in Santiago. I think anybody from Santiago would know them. And I said, they wear a cape. And then I started to search for pictures in the internet, and none of them have a cape anymore. And I remember growing up as a child, I think I had one of these outfits, and I think I had a cape. I mean, that was part of the whole thing. And I luckily find this photo of this Diablo Cojuelo, and posing, the adult one posing next to a boy, younger one, and the boy has a cape with the Dominican flag. So I say, here we go. The sacred cape from Spain, and then kind of the indecent carnival mask from the Dominican Republic, one speaking to the other. And there's a lot of questions about as to where this outfit comes from. Is it a syncretic outfit? Is it from Spain, Europe? Is it from, does it have roots in Africa? And I think it's a combination of all of these. Next one. And then while I was doing research at the Hispanic Society and looking at these objects, these photographs of capes and these paintings, I wanted to have I wanted to have encounters with people. And this is, we're still going through COVID. Seems to be coming back in New York, hopefully not. And I wanted to have encounters, and I knew that I couldn't have a big group of people. And also the society was undergoing renovations. And so I invited friends and colleagues and anyone, especially people of BIPOC backgrounds, and or people who lived in Washington Heights, or people who were connected in some ways to Haiti and the Dominican Republic, to come together with me, for us to come together. And so we would sit outside and have conversations about the mothering our mothers. And most of us, not everybody, have such stories about our mothers, or the whole concept of being mothered or mothering. And so here we have a photograph with dear friend, Moses Ross, who came prepared to our encounter. I'm holding a tiny image of La Virgen de la Altagracia that I found at the Mercado Modelo in Santiago, and I bought, which is the image that you find in a lot of voodoo altars. And by the way, talking about syncretism and hybridity, the European image of La Virgen de la Altagracia, perhaps not the exact image, but the iconography has found its way into the voodoo pantheon. She's revered by voodoo practitioners. I heard from my friend and mentor, Josue Gomez, who mentored me through this pilgrimage, that she rarely mounts, as we call in voodoo, she rarely possesses people. I don't know why. I want to do more research about that. Why doesn't she possess more people? And she has her own name, and she's revered both in Haiti and the Dominican Republic. Next slide, please. And so Moses Ross, as you can see, is holding La Virgen de la Altagracia and also showing an artwork that he created. I don't remember the exact name of this artwork, but I think it's called My Parents Are Heroes. Mis padres son héroes. And he and I talked about this. And by the way, if you could guess, the name of his mother, his late mother, is Altagracia. So here we have Moses Ross holding Altagracia. Moses is an artist from New York City of Dominican descent. His parents from the Dominican Republic in the round picture. And then the photo at the bottom is his mother, his brother, himself. And I asked Moses, like, what happened? His father had died by then. And I said, no, your father is in this picture. We can't see it here, but way back behind the people, there's a trophy that his father won. And I said, your father is, his presence is here. So coincidences, synchronicities, whatever you want to call them. Excuse me, I'm having some oranges. Next one. I didn't want to plan this pilgrimage in terms of rehearsing it. And yet I had two friends, close friends of mine, Laia Soler and Thelma Garcia, both artists. Thelma works with photography, Laia works with installation, performances, and videos. And they said, well, why don't we go on society? So we walked from my home in the South Bronx all the way to the Hispanic Society. So here are a couple of photographs stopping in the greenest borough of New York City. Yes, my beloved South Bronx. And you will never guess where this is because it seems like a forest. You can see some of the beautiful buildings we have here in the South Bronx. Actually, this is not the South Bronx. This is way out in the Bronx. And next photograph. And we are across from Yankee Stadium. And both Laia and myself are having some oranges, thinking about the mythologies, the stories of La Virgen de la Altagracia and how her devotion is connected to an orange tree. Next one. Maybe this is a good time to take a pause. If you need to adjust your bodies, if you need to have, if you're eating an orange, have a bite. And this is one of the sketches that I generated in preparation for the pilgrimage. Kind of a picture of me holding the Virgin on my head. The Virgin kind of revering, blessing her child. And then there's an umbilical cord from the navel and the belly button of the child to the map of the island of Hispaniola, Quisqueya and Haiti. Speaking perhaps and thinking perhaps of how this island, for me, I think represents the epicenter of everything that's called America. That's where everything, I understand it this way, the history of this entire hemisphere, or most of the histories as we know them, spread out from there. And with that said, because of timing in which the island was colonized, because of its histories in the so-called mythology, in the mythologies of the so-called New World, so-called discovery, which was actually a genocide of First Nation peoples and cultures and on and on. And I also wanted to point that the devotion of La Virgen de la Altagracia, as far as I know, is the first devotion to a virgin in the Americas. So I will leave it at that. That's the first devotion to a virgin in the Americas. And when I was at the Hispanic Society, I was questioning that. And this is not a criticism, because I was looking at the gaps and at the silences in the collection of the society. And I say, well, this building, it's in a mainly Dominican neighborhood. Do you have a Virgin de Altagracia? Oh, no. Then I asked about any Black virgins. Oh, are there any Black virgins even from Spain or from Europe? There were not. And so part of my proposal, my ongoing proposal, is to bring either one or small series of Virgen de Altagracias to the permanent collection of the Hispanic Society as a gesture of entering this space from the outside into the inside of the collection. Next one. And we can move a little faster into the pilgrimage, setting up the altar, the day off, the day that we traveled last week from my home in the South Bronx to the Hispanic Society. So this is what I propose to enact pilgrimage, to go on a pilgrimage with La Virgen de la Altagracia on my head, traveling from my home in the South Bronx to Washington Heights, listening to people in the street, being open to the encounters, open to emotions that might emerge along the way, and just seeing what happened. So I created this altar with, of course, with oranges. I think these are clementines, coffee, ginger tea, crackers, a photo of the Virgin, and some rose hips that I found outside the Hispanic Society. And this is in my parlor at home. Next one. All these photographs were taken for this pilgrimage were taken by Argenis Apolinario. I have to say that the video, which we will be editing and showing, perhaps at the Hispanic Society, it was filmed and will be edited by Jeffrey Jones. And when I spoke with Josue, he said, you gotta have music. You gotta have vocals. You gotta have sounds with this pilgrimage. I'm not much of a musical person, so I imagine this as a silent undertaking. Josue said, no, salve. Salve, for those who are not familiar with this type of music, salve came from the traditional liturgical music, salve, like Salve Regina, the one that's sung in Catholic churches. Salve Regina, a salve sung to the Virgin, came obviously from Europe and has been syncretized and appropriated and reappropriated, thank goodness, and infused with the power of African cultures. So salves are songs that in some cases are improvised. In other cases, they exist already. They had been created, but they're oral songs, and I guess they had been recorded. And they are sung in some cases when a baby died, which is called a bakini. It's a funeral where people don't necessarily cry. They celebrate the death of the baby with these salves because the baby is an angel. And some of these salves are sung when people engage on the pilgrimage to Higüey, the Basilica I show you, or when people have celebrations for the deity, or when they have celebraciones de santo, when they're celebrating the day of a saint. So with the Virgen en la cabeza, with an altar built by Quiquito Rodriguez, a good friend, and wearing a vestment that I designed and that was interpreted and sung by artist Susan Heisler from Michigan. Next one. Leaving my home. Next one. Here we have Bomba and Brian Jackson. Bomba and Brian singing Salve as the Virgin leaves the home. Pedro Bomba Osorio, Brian Jackson, next one. And if you can picture, the altar on one side has an image of the traditional image of, or historic image of the Virgin. And then when I turn the altar to the other side, it has a mirror. And I am proposing that all portraits are mirrors. All portraits are mirror. This is actually the topic of a new research and the topic of a class I'll be teaching, possibly in Texas. So next one. How do I see myself in the image of a white European virgin that was brought by the colonizer? The reaction of this person I encounter in the street is, oh, I see myself in the virgin. The reaction of a person I spoke with before the pilgrimage is like, when I went to the basilica, and I am a person of color, she said, when I looked at the virgin, I couldn't think of any of the complexities involved in the conversation about race. All of that was gone, and all I could feel was the essence, the spirit. These are some of the responses. Doesn't mean that I necessarily have to agree with them or that I agree with them. Next one. More of the people I encounter, Blanca Amezcua, next one. And some of the emotions that surge during the pilgrimage. These are people that I meet or met along the way. People petitioning to the Virgin, people also looking or finding emotions as they look at their portrait. So my question is, how would the Virgin de la Altagracia look if she were to represent physically Dominican people? And I don't know how many of you have been in the Dominican Republic, but the Dominican Republic is mostly a brown and black country. Next one. Next one. Next one, going through some very quiet areas, going in some of the crowded areas. The hub in the Bronx, which has been termed the 42nd Street, the Times Square of the South Bronx. And I would say it's probably the opposite. Times Square is the hub of the Bronx, of Manhattan. Next one. Next one. Next one. Taking a break, taking some, going for a pause during the pilgrimage, resting and looking at myself. Next one. Next one. Next one. And getting into Manhattan, crossing from the Bronx, border crossing from the Bronx into Manhattan. And I do have to say that I get goosebumps or got goosebumps when I thought about it. I actually envisioned this piece 30 years ago, walking through Times Square with the Virgin of Altagracia. And that's something that I saw a person do when I was 7. It's like, I would like to do that too. Next one. Meeting some people now in Washington Heights, people genuflecting, people crossing themselves and enacting all kinds of gestures when they see this image. It was very interesting to see how this white European-looking image tool imposed by the colonizer can draw Dominican people together, or many Dominican people. You could see the people I encountered in the street that were like, they were drawn to the image and there was a sense of connection there. Next one. Arriving at the Hispanic Society. Next one. Crossing the gates, meeting again Bomba and Brian. Next one. Arriving at the Hispanic Society. I always perceived that this building as being closed in, gated, sort of distant because of the kind of architecture it is, kind of distant, away from the neighborhood. And I always remember looking at this building and I'm like, what is this building about? When I moved to Washington Heights, I want to get in. So this is me, almost 32 years later, going into the Hispanic Society with a little piece of some of the Dominican communities into the institution. Next one. Next one. And once inside, Bomba and Brian singing salvas, me handing oranges like the ones I'm eating now, and thinking of this as a very small homeopathic gesture, a decolonizing gesture. And as a friend said, museums are by nature colonial institutions. Can museums be decolonized? I remember my friend Paco Cao saying that, can museums be decolonized? And I hope I'm quoting you correctly, Paco. And that made me think, can museums be decolonized? Museums are colonial institutions by nature. So with this very simple gesture, I wanted to bring some of the voices of the communities, Dominican communities, into the institution. Next one. The staff at Hispanic Society. Next one. With the South singers. Next one. With the person who has been instrumental to all of this and the person who invited me into the collection. Thank you, Alexander Campos. Thank you, Alex. And I think that this might be the last one. I'm thinking of all the people behind this pilgrimage, I dedicate this pilgrimage to Juana Camacho, Mommy, of all names, mother, Mommy, a long-term resident of Washington Heights, no longer alive, still present in my life. Next one. I'm thinking of all the people, I couldn't even mention the names, but if you see yourself here, I thank you. Lots and lots of people and over 100 hours to bring this simple pilgrimage to fruition. Next one. May your mother's presence guide you along the path. Some of the people who has been instrumental to this work. Next one. And the last one, may you all enjoy the blessings of creativity. Thank you, Pedro Bomba Osorio, Brian Jackson, Susan Heisler, Kikito Rodriguez, Josue Gomez, Argenis Apolinario, Jeffrey Jones, the Hispanic Society, Dominican Studies Institute, and I'll stop here, and Francia, la Reina de los Palos, Nina Paulino, Padre Luis Barrios. I could go on, I'll stop here. Thank you to la Virgen de la Altagracia, Tatica.
Nicolás, that was really so wonderful and such a touching presentation of your work. And I think we just barely scratched the surface. I know you have so much more to share. I'm really glad the way how you ended it, because I feel like there's a kind of a line that runs within your work about your relationships with people, and part of the pilgrimage is meeting people along the way. And so I thought I just wanted to start by asking you a little bit about your experience at the Hispanic Society. You said you looked at a lot of art, but it was also the people. And I just wondered if you could talk a little bit about your experience about this at the Hispanic Society, and how not just the art, but also your conversations and the people you met, both maybe at the staff and other artists who you may have met or were reacquainted with.
Thank you for this question, Margaret. I have to say that it was a wonderful cohort. It is a wonderful cohort of artists. And I'm not going to mention names because I'm afraid that I will forget somebody. And the staff and everybody at the Hispanic Society is so busy. And it's almost like looking this way because of the kind of materials that people are dealing with every day. I have to say that I don't know if I'm allowed to say that, I had in my hands a letter from the King of Spain. I couldn't believe that, from the 1600. I'm like, where in the world would I be able to have this experience? Not because it was the King of Spain, but because of the antiquity, because of the date of the document, and because of this document, whether it's a curse, whether it's whatever I want to call it or think of, because of the genocide. It's like I'm holding this historic document that basically in some ways changed the world and the world of so many people. I could feel the energy. And with that said, all the interactions that I had with the staff at the Hispanic Society, getting to look at whole pieces of churches from Catalonia and crying virgins and crosses and books of professions. I don't know where else I could do that.
That's great. Well, I have to say it was also, for us a learning experience. And I feel like we learned so much about our collection from you and your insight and how you, your view on these pieces as sacred objects and how you interpret them. But I think these conversations have really added to our work as well, and who we are. And that kind of community building, I think, was really important for us as well. And I also am intrigued about this idea of sort of the museum as a pilgrimage site. And is it it was your, and in a way, I was sort of thinking about the pilgrimage from Santiago to Upper Manhattan, and then from the Bronx to Washington Heights, and then to the Hispanic Society. And so I would love to hear kind of your thoughts on a museum as a pilgrimage site. I think is quite interesting, especially given the art that we have within it. You touched a little bit about it, but I would love for you to expand.
In my opinion, and I think that in the opinion of many people, all art was initially created with a sacred purpose. And eventually art became secular, or some art. And a lot of my work has happened at the intersection of art and religion, art and spirituality. I'm one of these people who's not afraid of religion. I remember my mentor, Linda Mary Montano, with all the problems and the things that I don't agree with, religion and the institution of religion, because I consider myself a forward-thinking person. And as some of my colleagues, when I went to seminary, said, religion should be at the forefront of social justice. It not always is, sadly. So I'm not afraid of religion. And Linda Montano talks about she's not afraid of Catholicism or the Catholic Church, something like that. I don't want to misquote Linda, but Linda, if you're here, you know what I'm saying. I'm not afraid of touching religion and dealing with religion within my artwork. And I have done work in sacred spaces. So all art was sacred or done for sacred purposes. And yes, I've been exploring this idea of museums as sacred sites. Maybe they're not sacred, but people have now, I mean, for many years, many decades, and now people, if you think about the Metropolitan Museum, the cloisters, for many people, they don't necessarily go on pilgrimage to a sacred site to go and see a virgin or a rendition of a Christ or a saint. They travel to see the Mona Lisa in Paris, or they travel to see an artwork. So in that sense, the idea of pilgrimage has been reconfigured, and the idea of the icon has been reconfigured as well, where some of the icons have become deities, like Mona Lisa, just to name one.
So I think we have one, by the way, we have people from all over different parts of the world, which is really exciting for us. And I know we have one question kind of related to that, Laura. I think it was related to the Altagracia. We have
Yes,
Laura
someone.
above us. Thank you.
That was beautiful, Nicolás. Thank you. There's a question from the audience. If you could speak more about how Our Lady of Altagracia appeared in the Voodoo pantheon.
Wow, I wish I could have more information about that. As far as I know, her iconography is the same European iconography, and as far as I know, and I was talking to one of the people with whom I had an encounter. She's connected to Haiti, and she said in voodoo, in African voodoo, there are not images, because I'm so married to this idea of images. You know, I am a person who has grown up in a syncretic experience, and I view the world in a syncretic way. And I actually had a friend who said to me, wait a minute. Not all cultures are syncretic. So I said, thank you for that teaching. My worldview is syncretic. It's about everything. It's about integrating everything. And when I think of voodoo, voodoo basically takes elements of, or welcome elements of all spiritualities and religions and rework them, at least here in the so-called New World, in the Americas. And so this person said to me, voodoo traditionally is not about iconography, it's not about images, it's about energies, people going to the forest to revere a tree, to work with a tree, to work with energies, to work with different forces. And she said, maybe, because I was thinking, how would the Virgin of Altagracia look if she were really to represent physically, externally? Because I feel from what I heard that internally, she represents many of the energies of the Dominican people, maybe not all, And but what if she worked to embody externally how Dominican people might look and feel in their bodies? And this person said, well, maybe it's not an image, maybe it's an energy. I don't know if that answers your question. And so when I was thinking, do I want to invite a non-traditional family, new, different kinds of families to embody this nativity? Do I entertain the idea of embodying the Virgin of Altagracia myself? What do I do? And this person said, it is an energy. It could be an energy. A couple of people said that to me. Think in terms of an energy.
Nicolás, one of the things that I think our listeners will want to hear about is, I had the good fortune of being a part of the pilgrimage, and that I helped receive you, and that I really felt privileged to be a part of that. Many people were not able to, and so now what we do have, though, is this video that it was videotaped. How do you see that being kind of existing and continuing the life of this pilgrimage and this work that you did? And when can we, where are we gonna, I'm hoping that maybe we could show it at some point when it's done. I think that would be really wonderful. But can you just tell our listeners a little bit about what you hope to do with the video?
Well, the video will show once it's edited in different places, and maybe I will use the video as not always, as a tool to talk about some of the points that I touch here. But actually, I see more the altar serving that role. I would like to bring the altar, and I've been in conversation with, I hope it's okay to say that, Padre Barrios. I've been in conversation with amazing Padre Barrios, Father Barrios, he's part of a church. I know I said, Father, you are like in charge. And he said, no, I'm not in charge. And it's like, yes, I am with the church. So thinking about horizontal ways. We are a community. So he said, I would love to be able to bring the altar to different sacred spaces and also secular spaces, and just sit the altar on a table, maybe invite people to propose some offerings, then to open up a conversation, more of a circle in the form of healing circles, for which I work, Healing Circles Global. Open up a circle to talk about image and representation, to talk about the Virgin, to talk about race and ethnicity within the context of the island. I mean, with everything that's happening in the Dominican Republic now in relationship to our neighbor Haiti, where Black and Haitian Dominicans and on are being detained, detained while Black. And so it's a lot to talk about how, and it's a lot. So I would like to be able to bring the altar with the Virgin on one side and the mirror on the other to talk about some of these issues, and to just no agenda, to open up the conversation to whatever emerges from the group, and to listen to each other.
Well, I really look forward to that. I think it's such an important conversation, and you raised so many important themes here and topics, and it's such a privilege, really, Nicolás, for us to have you here this evening and to have worked with you. I hope this is just the beginning of a long relationship with you, do more projects together, and have you come back to continue. So thank you. I just want to thank our audience for joining us this evening. This presentation was and is recorded, so it will be on our website. So if you want to share it for your friends, we encourage you. We will have another virtual event in January, but until then, have a wonderful holiday season. And Nicolás, I leave you to have the last word if you want to say your last, goodbyes.
And talking about how will the video will be used. Well, those who are watching can use this video as a tool for engaging in some of the conversations that we discussed here tonight. And all I have to say is may each one of you be safe and protected. Much love to each one of you. And thanking everyone who worked so hard to make this happen. And la Virgen también, Tatica.
Muchas gracias.
Gracias.
Okay, I ended the stream.